Good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Carter Krech, a global program manager with ULG, and I will be serving as your guide into the world of localization. Joining me tonight from Japan is ULG Senior Project Manager John Sheehy. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing very good, Carter. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. And could you take a minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm a senior project manager based in Japan for the United Language Group. I've been with ULG now for about 10 years, but I have about 25 years experience in the localization business, both on the client and on the vendor side. At the moment, basically working mainly with medical clients, so managing the clinical trials translation effort for clients based around the world.
Excellent, thank you. So tonight, John, we're looking to answer the question of what is localization and why is it important to your business? So if you imagine yourself as somebody within an existing company or in an emerging company that is interested in bringing their content, internationally, right? Or as somebody in an existing company who's found themselves in a role where they are now in charge of localization or been handed a project of, hey, we need to get our website translated or localized into another language, and they have no idea where to start or even know what localization is. How would you start off with describing what is localization?
Well, I think people who are new to localization would view localization as translation only. That is only one aspect of localization. It is probably the key aspect. So the translation comes first. So that's basically taking words from one language and transferring them to another language, giving the same meaning. So we take into things like the latest nuances in the language locally. So language is always evolving. So you need to keep up to date with changes to the vernacular, the wording in that country. ULG employs linguists who are based in country, so they are aware of the changes at a local level to the language. But not only that, in terms of if you're translating something, you need somebody who is a subject matter expert in that area. So if you're translating for a financial product or a marketing campaign, you would need different types of linguists. So we would choose linguists who would know that subject matter very, very well. And again, you need people with a level of experience. So the minimum that we would be looking at for our linguists in country would be 3 years relevant experience in that area. So that at a low level takes care of what is translation. So that's taking the meaning from one language and transferring it into another language so that the viewer or the reader of that material would feel that the language has been written in their language and not translated. So it would feel natural in that language.
And I think that's another point that you mentioned there, or a key element of translation is that it's an accurate representation of the content in another language, right? So the focus of translation is on accuracy, right?
That's correct. It's getting the same meaning. So I mean, the nuances in a certain language, the flow of another language may differ to the original language that the material is written in. But what you're trying to do is to get the meaning across to the local reader of that material so that it feels as if it was written in that original language and not a translation. Sometimes translations can be very awkward and can be very literal, and that doesn't read well in the local language. So you need people who are experts in the language, the subject matter, and also to be able to in some ways transpose the language so that it appears natural.
Gotcha. Okay. So what could you help provide a few examples maybe of how localization might differ from just straight translation?
Well, localization then takes it a step further. So it takes into account cultural aspects of the target country. You might have different countries speaking the same language, but culturally, if you're targeting an audience in Spain versus an audience in Latin America, say for instance Argentina, the wording would be quite different. So you need to be culturally sensitive to that target country. So some of the things that might work in one country, images, colors, slang, may not work as well or be as relevant in another country. Generally, it is something that you need to be very, very sensitive of when you're developing the source material. Make sure that any images that you would be using would be culturally sensitive worldwide, so that they wouldn't cause offense if applied to another culture. Things like memes, they're always changing and evolving and whatever, and can mean something very, very different in another country, even in the same language. So you need to take a look at it from a holistic point of view. What is your intended audience? What is the culture of that local language, and to target that, so to get, as I say, the best bang for the buck, and make sure that you're engaging with your audience from a culturally sensitive point of view.
And I think the targeting, the target audience and the engagement there also kind of lead us into another element of localization, which would be the intended results for a piece of content that's undergoing the process. So one other element that localization takes into consideration would be helping to achieve those intended results, right? So normally when you're getting something translated, it's typically not just to have it, quote unquote, in that language, right? The point of it, of getting your website localized into French, isn't just to have a French website, right? There's normally an intended result through increased, traffic or increased sales or viewer engagement, audience engagement. There's normally a target there, or a targeted result that's trying to be achieved that localization can influence.
Definitely. So I think, before approaching localization, you need to take a look at, what you hope to achieve. And with localization and using linguists who are aware of the local culture, you can actually plan ahead to achieve those results. And as I say, in terms of like engagement, it's very, very important to make sure that for a website, for example, that it feels and appears as if it was written for the target audience, and that there are no cultural slip ups that would make it look or appear as if it has been translated. So, say for instance, the use of idioms or slang, or something that would be very popular, say in the United States, would be an idiom like "hit it out of the park" from baseball. That wouldn't really work well in countries where baseball is not popular. Say for in England, they would use the term "hit it for six," because that is a term that is used in cricket. So even in the same language, a term like that wouldn't be incorrect, and the audience probably would understand it. But again, it wouldn't be culturally sensitive, and might put some of the viewers of that website off a little bit, that they were using terms that wouldn't be culturally relevant.
Yeah, it makes me think of another term of it would kind of like a break the immersion, right? Or like breaking, not quite breaking the fourth wall in some instances of it, but you can definitely tell that the what you're ingesting, whether it's a website or a marketing campaign or something, wasn't written in your language. You can tell that it's an outside perspective as opposed to something that was authored, you know, for you as the target audience.
Yeah, and I think this also leads to another aspect of localization, which would be transposing some of the text for a particular audience or country. So you would actually be deviating from the source and adding something or taking away something that might make your engagement better at a local level.
Exactly. Yep. So if we're to string this all together then into an example, right? So if you have let's say you have a website that you're trying to localize. Um, as you mentioned at the beginning there, it's important to make sure that the linguist teams that are being leveraged have in-country experience to the target market, right? So that way they're up to date on the most up to date linguistics for the target language. They're up to date on the subject matter itself as it pertains to that target market. Um, and they're up to date on any of the most, I would say, most recent uh, relevant, like anything from news to trends and fads as well, depending on the nature of the website, right? If there's marketing material and the authors are trying to come across in a certain way, like a style or a certain tone, whether that's hip or friendly or cool in that target market, right? It's best to leverage those who have the on the ground experience to be able to reproduce that the most accurately.
Yeah, that's correct. But again, something that you've mentioned there in terms of like the tone of a campaign, it might work very well being informal in one country, but in another country, you might want to change that tone to be a little bit more formal, because something that is informal or hip or cool just would not come across well in a given country. Um, but then again, in some other countries, they might want it to come across a little bit looser. So you might have something that it would be very formal in one country, but you actually don't want to approach it that way in a different audience. So again, working with people who are subject matter experts on the ground, who know what you're aiming for. So again, before you approach localization, you need to take a look at what you're trying to get out of this and to be prepared to explain that in a way that is easy for the people who are going to be taking care of the translation localization on your behalf, so that they can understand what your final results need to be, and that they can engage with that on a local excuse me, they can engage with the latest terminology, the latest slang, memes, so that they actually make sure that they are being culturally sensitive, and they give you the results that you're looking for.
Yeah, and it helps to kind of, essentially they're kind of front loading the process, right? So as opposed to taking your message that's authored in American English and trying to translate that or localize that into Japanese just as it is, um, can lead to this disconnect that we mentioned there, right? Where it doesn't achieve its intended results if it's only translated in a very uh, accurate and kind of verbatim way, right? You need to be able to have the conversations with the experts up front to be able to determine how far from the source can you deviate, or what is the intended goal with this piece of content, or the intended feeling that the audience is supposed to receive. How do you sound hip or cool in Japan, right? If you're taking it from English. So I guess actually from your own experience there, like when you're trying to come across as, let's say, more informal or friendly, is that something that you've noticed is done in Japan?
It depends on the company. Some companies have a reputation for being formal, and if you take a look at their websites, everything is very businesslike and very very formal. Then there are the new or young companies that are trying to engage with the younger audience. So some would say like the mobile phone companies, you can see that their target audience is young teenagers or those who are university students, and their marketing campaigns are cool, hip. They get the latest um, stars to advertise their brands and represent them. Their online or video campaigns are flashy and hip, and they use memes and so on and so forth. Whereas the older brands are just they tend to be quite bland and formal, but that's what it's expected. And the those kind of brands that would be formal, they're coming across that you can trust us. We've been here, we've been doing this for a long time, and that's the kind of the image that they want to portray, and that works for them. whereas it wouldn't work for the new and upcoming mobile companies.
Trying to break into the market, and that makes sense. Very cool. So if we're to bring everything together, then would it be accurate to say that localization is the adaptation of content from one language to another that is not only accurate but also culturally aware?
Yeah, I mean, at the basis, you need it to be linguistically accurate. So that has to be the basis. But you also have to take a step back and then take a look at, as you say, like before, the results. What are you trying to gain here? And then from that, target towards what is culturally relevant and sensitive, so that your product comes across as being culturally aware, and that increases your engagement at a local level. Then.
Yep. So you could almost say that localization is the bridge that connects language through culture to results.
Yeah, it maximizes your engagement at a local level. Yes.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, for today, thank you, John, for your time and insights. I think that's all we have time for right now. Thank you to our viewers and listeners. Thank you, John, and have a great night.
You too. All the best, then.